Call this meeting to order,
Strange about the whole
starting with the invocation of the pledge. Heavenly Father, let only the truth come forward tonight, and let all falsehood fall on deaf ears and be washed away. In Jesus' name, amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please, Mrs. Kutcher.
Mr. Powell.
Here.
Mr. Bronner.
Here.
Mr. Bishop.
Here.
Mr. Boehner.
Here.
Mr. Tommen.
Here.
Mrs. Kroger. Here. Mrs. Edichico. Here.
7 present. We have a quorum for business and a quorum for legislation. So approval of minutes. Did everybody get a copy of the minutes?
Two of these if you want one.
Has everybody read a copy of the minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Is everybody ready to approve? Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Oh, okay.
I was going to get one.
First one goes to Tommen,
There you go.
Second.
and a second for Mr. Powell. Voice vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried by voice vote. Audience participation. Yes, ma'am. Please step to the microphone. There's a blurb I'm supposed to read, but I'm just going to go from memory. You get 5 minutes, speak on whatever topic you've got.
I think I can get this done in 5 minutes. Some of you already know who I am. For those who don't, I'm Rhonda Kirby. I live on East Columbia, down the street from the schools. I just wanted to bring to the council's attention the speeding that goes on down Columbia during school hours. I've called the police department on a couple occasions, and there's really no activity for those speeders. I mean, there's no officers that are monitoring that road during school hours. The speeders, I mean, they're parents, they're construction people, they're buses, it's everybody. So I'm not gonna pick on just one group of people that are speeding, but I'm a little concerned, not just because of the speeders, but the sidewalks that run down that street for those kids. They walk in packs down those sidewalks, and there's barely enough room for one child to walk down that sidewalk, let alone a bunch of kids. So with the speeding and those kids walking down the sidewalks, I'm fearful that one of them's going to get hit one day. I've yelled at a couple kids who are walking in the streets. I know I shouldn't do that. I've yelled at people speeding down the streets. I've become that person that I'm yelling at them to slow down. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. I know that there's a sign on Balser that has shows the speed limit. I don't think the signs on Columbia are big enough. I know there's flashing signs, but I don't really think they're in a position that people can see when they're driving around that short curb, because it's pretty up high. But that's pretty much all I have. I just wanted to make everybody aware that I'm very concerned about that traffic going down that street, and the sidewalks are not adequate enough. So that's all.
Okay.
Thanks.
Do you want?
Well, just if I could, I know our police have been on Bolser because of complaints about that exit or entry there, so we'll move around to Columbia.
I did hear some parents complaining about getting tickets on Balser. So I know that they're mad that they have to turn right out of that street, especially with Third Ridge, the construction on there, but it's temporary. So I don't know why they're complaining, but they should be complaining about that Columbia. A lot of the parents are speeding to get their kids. I mean, they're just running late, or I don't know what it is, but nobody pays attention to the speed limit, 20 miles an hour through there. During school hours or during recess, they should be more cautious of those 2 time periods. Morning, there's about a dozen kids that walk past my house during the day. And my son's, he was terrified one day because he seen 3 kids just about get crossing the street, not in a crosswalk, but crossing the street. I forgot to note, I've gone up to Maple Drive because my grandson likes to walk up to that corner to cross the street to come back to my house. And sometimes that light, the crosswalk light works, sometimes it doesn't. So I've actually stopped traffic on Columbia trying to get them across, a group of kids across that street. So I don't know if, and I've watched that light. It does work occasionally. But I don't know what kind of timing system it's on. If it's just, it lets traffic through like twice before they get a walk. I don't know. I don't know. I can't tell you without just hanging out there all day.
Well, unless there's some horrible emergency, our police chief watches all these meetings. And, you know, unfortunately, speeding's everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, if I could address the whole city and I was restricted to one sentence, honest, please slow down as you drive,
Yeah.
it would probably be the most helpful thing the mayor of the city could say, believe it or not.
It's just not ready and it's everywhere.
And it is the truth. And it is. I mean, Thorn Ridge Drive, with it all tore up, we still get speeding complaints.
Yeah.
In fact, you know, we gave a speeding ticket with all of it torn up
Yeah.
not too long ago, and somebody thought it was for people going the wrong way, and we encourage people to go one way to make it safer for construction workers so they can work quicker and get out of everybody's way a little bit quicker. But every street,
Yeah.
you know, Sanborn Court, you know, what is it, less than a quarter mile long, and people speeding. It's a shame. But honest, if I was restricted to one sentence, please slow down as you drive. And second would be don't litter for Patrick. So Patrick's here.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other residents wish to comment? Please come to the microphone. Little caution, that microphone is not the greatest in the world. You almost have to eat it.
Well, I'm not the greatest speaker, so we're good match. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
you can pull that out if you need to. Move
It's,
it around.
yeah, it's fine. I came tonight because I'm a little bit concerned. My name's Kenneth McKenzie. I live at 404 Flora, and that's up by Flaggy Park, right off of 5th Street, actually. And I'm the only house up that drive. And I have a lot of trouble since the Notre Dame built the rental property at the top of the hill. I get a lot of water runoff. It increased really, that's when I really first started to know it. But I put in new basins, catch basins to defer the water. But I still have trouble with my driveway. My driveway's gravel. And when I bought the house, the city always maintained the entire gravel road. And the last time I inquired about it, because I couldn't get any gravel, I was told that that's an undedicated street, and as such, Reading did not have to maintain it. Out of my pocket, it's a considerable cost. I've paid to have it re-graveled and taken the backhoe or whatever and widen it or whatever. Well, just not widen it, but to grade it. That's the word I'm searching for. As a senior, I have a trouble calling words from time to time. But at any rate, I have a problem with the gravel. And even though I was given to understand that I own about half of it and the city owns the other half. And because it's not dedicated, you do not have to maintain it at all. And that is a public park. That's access to a public park. I started to, when I first bought the house, I inquired about, this is 30 years ago, but I inquired about blacktopping all of that. I just wanted to blacktop the street. But I was told that I couldn't, that it was still a city street at that time, and I guess still is, as far as I know. But my problem is that down on the lower half, as you enter and leave the park, there's big potholes down there. It looks like some of the kids maybe have sat and just spun their tires and dug down into the limestone or whatever may have been under the gravel and dug 3-4 inch holes, I would say. I can't go in and out of there without bumping my car pretty much, and I can't go in and out of there anytime it rains without getting my tires all muddy, and it's become pretty much of a nuisance for me. And I was hoping to find out if the city will not maintain the driveway any longer, I will need at least something to tell me where my property begins and ends, something in writing that will tell me what I have to maintain and how. And I guess I don't want it to sound like a threat, but I would like for my attorney to peruse it, read it, and tell me what's mine and what isn't. On my map, when I bought the property, it shows that Flora goes all the way out and comes up beside Notre Dame on Columbia at the top of the hill. And I just didn't think a load of gravel a couple times a year would be a big deal to the city, but it seems to be. So I was wondering if you could, if you won't maintain it, if you're going to force me to maintain the rest of it, I'm going to have a definition of where it starts and stops. That's the long and short of all that. I really don't want to have to get into. I'm not angry with anybody. I don't want to get into any kind of argument over what's what, who owns what. But I would like for the city to take a look at it and see if they can do anything about it. Like I said, I still can't get out of my driveway without my tires getting muddy and getting mud all over my car, and I even when I drive out nice and slow, which I know there's kids over there, and I try to do that, but I have a problem getting in and out of my driveway. Long story short, so anything that y'all could get your heads together, take a look at, and see if you can help me with it, I would be appreciative and thank you for it. But otherwise, if you see that you can't do it, I would at least like something in writing to define what is mine and is not mine for passage through there. So that's the story.
Well, if you would, before you go, I'll give you my cell number. I'd love to have your number. We'll take a very close look at it. Okay. And I don't know who told you what they told you, and it might have been for good reason, but we will look at it.
Okay. Well, I would appreciate it. I will leave that with you, but I'm probably going to leave when I get finished here because I can do that. Well, thank you very much. I'll give you a call and I'll give you my number then. I've seen this presentation, so I'm not going to stay for it. But it's good. I mean, and it's informative, and I really think that education is the key to anything in this day and time, jobs and everything else. So anyway, thank you for your consideration. I appreciate you listening to me, and I will give you a call tomorrow, sir.
For the one other thing, just last week, our safety service director and I met with our stormwater engineers, and we have to do a report that's mandated each and every year. And we were looking into, and in fact, our engineers are going to look into the corner of 4th Street and Benson, where there's been a lot of water runoff.
Right.
And, we had done some work as a city, to help with drainage there. So anyway, they're looking into that, but I'll add also, your drainage problem from the hilltop.
Right,
There are
right.
stormwater engineers, and I'll alert them, and maybe when they're out in town here to help solve Benson Street's problem, maybe they can address yours as well.
Okay, well, I thank you for your time and your consideration, and I appreciate any efforts that you do put forth, so thank you very much.
And thank you. Please call.
All right, I will, thank you.
Any other audience participation?
If we have a question for the school board, should that wait until they do their presentation?
Come right on up. We'll get it cleared up now.
Okay. My name is Scott Bothy. I live at 757 East Benson Street. This morning, I put the question out on Facebook, is there a good place for Reading schools to get, financials so we can see where the money goes, our tax dollars go? And I was told, I was given a link, which was helpful to get the kind of the general beats of, how the money is spent out of different funds. And then I was given also the idea of going to a Ohio Open Checkbook, which I did not find helpful at all, even from my laptop. So I guess my question is there a way or a tool or a resource from Reading schools to see where actual individual dollars go? And just to give an example of that, to make it simple, how much do you spend on paint? How much do you spend on floor wax? How much do you, actual individual things that go into maintaining a building? How much goes to this? How much goes to that? Down to the actual pay, like who's getting paid, what company is getting paid. And if they could provide that, I think it would be a great resource to the community. If you are asking for tax dollars, which they desperately need, obviously, I think that's a good thing to show them how that money's being spent. I mean, our math teachers are really big on telling us to show your work, and that's all we're asking. It's great, like I said, when I looked at those audits, they were great because they do show you, how those funds are, how they do work and where the money comes from, where it goes, but it doesn't show you the actual individual, the work. So that's my question.
So, Mr. Bothy, it's a great question. It deserves an answer. This isn't the forum where we can answer that because we aren't the school district.
Okay.
So that would be properly posed at a school district meeting. I can tell you from my experience in the last, I actually checked about 2 hours ago. Ohio Checkbook has Reading's information, at least most of it, uploaded through January of this year.
Right.
A couple years ago, I checked Ohio Checkbook, and I found some information from the schools. But when I checked, like I said, about an hour or so ago, Ohio Checkbook had zero information for Reading schools. So whatever was there has been scrubbed. So I don't know why or how, but that's problematic for lots of reasons. So, great question.
All right.
We can't answer this one.
I'll ask at the proper venue then.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, all right, thank you.
Any other guest participation or audience participation? Okay. Seeing none, we're going to move on to reading of communications. Mrs. Coucher, do you have any communications to read?
No, sir.
Any council members, any communications to read? Okay. So moving on, we are going to guest speakers. We only have one scheduled, but before he comes up, I need to read a statement that addresses Mr. Bothy's question and questions of people who are watching online right now, and some of the people in the room here.
And this is a communication from
This is
who?
not a communication. This is a
okay.
prepared statement by me. So, Mayor Bemis has asked that the Reading School Superintendent, Mr. Enix, have an opportunity to address council. It should be noted that Mr. Enix was afforded such an opportunity in January and made a lengthy presentation regarding the district's financial situation and a property tax levy that is on this May's primary ballot. As previously stated in this council, Ohio law makes clear that municipal corporations, this addresses you, Mr. Bothy, And school districts are separate political subdivisions, each having its own governing body, taxing authority, budgets, geographical boundaries, and constituencies. I'm told that various social media posts circulating over the last several years indicate a loss of this distinction in the minds of some of the people within our community. This may be exacerbated by certain people referring to various establishments within Reading that the city does not own as our this or our that. We need to be accurate in the use of language in order to avoid this confusion. I've been given recent postings from the Reading Community Forum Facebook page, right here, that suggest that tonight's meeting here in council is an opportunity to address bullying in the Reading Community School District. This issue is also appropriately addressed at a school board meeting. The next one will occur tomorrow night in the School Media Center at 5:30. School issues should be brought to the school board. City Council has no jurisdiction on those matters. Even if bullying rises to the level of an arrest, the onus to act would be on the police department, not on City Council. Out of respect for and in recognition of the autonomy of the city and the school district, we must proceed very carefully to ensure that the school board business does not become inappropriately entangled in city business. In the prior council, one council member properly recused himself from matters involving the district because of an ongoing business relationship with the district. Just a few weeks ago, another council member properly recused himself from matters involving the city due to an ongoing business relationship within the city, or with the city, and this is the standard that we must follow. In order to ensure that this council operates at the highest level of ethical standards, it is important to note that certain council members need to recuse themselves from issues regarding the city and the school district. Maribel Bemis's wife is a school counselor. Her name's Terry Bemis, and his nephew, Brian Bemis, is a teacher employed by the school district. Brian is also first cousin to Councilmember Shelley Kroger, who is Bo's niece. The mayor's niece-in-law, Alicia Walker Bemis, is a school board member, and his teacher, Brian Bemis's wife. Additionally, Mayor Bemis is related to council members Andy Bronner and Andy's sister, Katie Adachico. Separately, Councilmember Scott Tomlin is a teacher employed by the school district and is also brother-in-law to school board member Amy Tomlin. And even Law Director Dave Stevenson, by Ohio law, and this is very unfortunate, is employed by both the city and the school district. Therefore, it is easy to be concerned about multiple appearances of impropriety and the potential for conflicts of interest, and advocating the school district's levy at a city council meeting is inherently problematic. In fact, the audience provided to Mr. Enix via his January appearance can generate legitimate demands for equal time from groups or individuals holding an opposing view, and the slightest sense of fairness would require us to honor such a demand. We cannot compound this situation by entertaining further discussion of school board specific business, for example, the levy or bullying here tonight. Therefore, the tax levy presentation emailed to me last night will not be shown here, as the reverse situation would be for members of council to attend a school board meeting to discuss city business. It doesn't belong there. I suggest that the district contact ICRC directly to produce a program to their liking on this matter, for the same as they do for televising school-sponsored athletic events. However, discussion of city-related business such as the stadium lease or a property transfer to the city involving central school property would be appropriate. If Mr. Enix has city business to discuss, he is welcome to step to the microphone and state the city business.
Well, pardon me, Dwight, I'd like to see where in a Ohio revised code it allows you to not allow a guest speaker who council openly accepted. I'd like to hear Dave's opinion on that. And quite honestly, I think 2 weeks ago at least, I notified City Council this, there were no objections. And so I invite Mr. Enix to come out and do his presentation.
Well, I have to overrule you on that because, point of order, it's not a mayor's meeting, it's a council meeting. You're welcome to schedule a mayor's meeting anytime, just not during council.
But a president of council also can't overstep his bounds either.
The bounds are not being overstepped. The bounds are defined in the Ohio Revised Code. You're bringing him in to discuss school district business, which is valid business, by the way. I don't discount the business of the school. The school district business is valid business, and it's important business, and it needs to be looked at, just not here. There's a school board meeting tomorrow, and there was some sort of inter-communication meeting between the city, some of the representatives here, and the school district that either occurred recently or is scheduled to occur, I don't remember which, because I'm not part of that, where this can be discussed. It is not council business.
Mr. Dahm, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say I have a
Mr.
question,
Dahm,
too.
everything else for every meeting is sent out to council for revision prior to these meetings. I find this curious that this is just being sprung on everyone now.
Okay, so whose meeting is it? The council's meeting or the mayor's meeting?
Council.
Council's meeting. Which council member invited him?
Pardon me, they all did.
It doesn't matter. We're a community of one, regardless of school and council. It doesn't matter. I
Okay.
mean, it's educational for everybody, that's why you've got it.
Please step to the microphone so that we can capture
Can I ask a
this.
question really fast, though? If this is a council meeting, shouldn't council vote on whether or not he can present?
Absolutely.
Yeah, if no one had objections to the
That is your option.
Then vote on it.
So, did you make a motion?
I do make a motion.
You make a motion that we hear Mr. Enix,
Yes.
and it's seconded by Mr. Bronner. All right, Mrs. Kutcher, roll call, please.
Mr. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Bronner,
Yes.
Mr. Bishop.
Yes.
Mr. Boehner,
No.
Mr. Tommen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kroger,
Yes.
and Mrs. Edichico.
Yes.
And my apologies, Jason. This won't happen again. This is a first. This is what, my 22nd year? I know there's others in this room that go back further than I, and never remember a school official being denied to speak to city council. In fact, I took the liberty of talking to Mr. Enix, saying, just about anybody can step up to this microphone at any given meeting over any given topic. And there's been a wide variety of them, including, myself
Hold
getting
on.
beat
Point
up
of
for
order.
several years.
Point of order. Mr. Enix is recognized, not you, Mr. Bemis.
Well, thank you.
Mr. Enix, please step to the microphone. Council has spoken.
You have a presentation for us, sir?
Good evening, everyone. I will try not to eat the microphone, but I do want to make sure everyone has a chance to hear me. First of all, I'd like to thank the council for the opportunity to present tonight. My purpose of being here is simply to educate. I have been out and about in this community and with individuals and small groups for quite some time. And what I've learned during these presentations and these meetings is the amount of misinformation that is circulating amongst residents and community members about all kinds of things, not just related to our school district. So my purpose of being here is to be able to educate and help people understand so that they can be well informed and understand where our school district is, because my belief is our school districts and our city have to work together. We're all in this together. So sharing this information is an opportunity for council and for those that are watching here in the audience and those at home to learn more of the information that's being shared in a variety of venues, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. Really just want to share the basics, and again, this is for all community members, all voters who will have an opportunity in May to cast their ballot towards our operating levy. This is going to be some duplication from when I was here several weeks ago, but quite a bit of new information has surfaced that I think is important for council and for the city to understand about where our school district is. Again, this is just the overall information. We are on the ballot. It's a 9.99 mil continuing operating levy. Funds are used for everyday expenses. These are operating expenses. They turn on the lights, they pay the water bill, they pay salaries and benefits for our staff. We are a people business, and that is what education really is at its core. And so therefore, the largest amount of our budget goes towards to the personnel that work with our students every day. Important for information for people to know is 1 mil in this community generates approximately $208,000. 9.99 mils is approximately a $2 million school levy for annual operating expenses. It's additional annual income for the operating expenses. The last new request by the Board of Education for operating funds was in 2009. That was 13 years ago. If not successful, the district has committed to reducing our operating expenditures by approximately $1.3 million. And I will show you the reason for that. I won't go over the timeline of events in a lot of detail, but this is a timeline for your review. I know, Council, you've received this presentation before and have had, or previous to tonight, and so you've been able to review this. But for those at home, there are some highlighted things I just want to bring to your attention. Again, I really kind of want to highlight here that 2009 was the last new operating funds. It has been renewed on 2 occasions, 2012, 2018. The 18 was a substitute levy. It essentially took the place of the 2009 and continued those operating funds into the future. Slight exception to no new operating funds is new construction. That's what a substitute levy does. It does allow for slight amounts of growth on a previous levy with new construction only. I think it's important to note that back in 2019, the 5-year forecast that was submitted to the Board of Education and approved noted at that time there would be a need for additional operating funds or a decrease in revenue or a combination of the two. And the district did enact $1.8 million of reductions in cost savings in the spring and summer of 2020. That also happened to be at the same time the pandemic hit. And so at that time of believing we needed to be on the ballot in 2020, the Board of Education determined it was not the appropriate time to be on the ballot because there were a lot of people really struggling at that time, as we all remember. So it's been postponed, and we got a little bit of a lifeboat from federal ESSER dollars, and that has helped offset our district expenses significantly during these past 2 years until now is the time when it's absolutely necessary. The Board of Education did take the Finance Committee's recommendations and are on the ballot for a 9.99 mil levy on May 3rd. I think I've shared this with you before. This is anticipated cost to homeowners. I'm going to dive into this a little bit deeper because in all of the information sessions I've had with residents and staff members and community members, there is one very, very significant, glaring misconception, and that is how taxes are calculated. So I'm going to give an example tonight of what that looks like so that everyone has an understanding of what this actually means. We have a staff member who recently purchased a home in Reading. That was last year. What I'd like to point out, this is a sample tax information from the Hamilton County Auditor's website. It is cited down here at the bottom. You're readily able to go find this on your own if you are interested. It shows here that the assessed value of this property is $61,900. Okay, that is not the purchase price, and it is not what the market value is. Again, this is 184 Waxwing. Again, a staff member allowed me to share this. I did block this out. This does show who it is, but for our purposes, that's not necessary to share tonight. If you're interested, you can go find this if it's like on the auditor's website. What I want to point out, though, is that in 2021, this house was purchased for $240,000. That was the sale price of the home, okay? Was not the market value, because as you can see on the Hamilton County Auditor's site, the assessed value, or I'm sorry, the market value of that property is $176,870. For tax collection purposes, the assessed value is 35% of what the auditor says the market value is. So when you do a quick calculation of 176 times 35%, what you're really getting is $61,910. That is what is used to calculate the property tax. So I've got a sample. No, it's not a sample. It's this example. But here's the calculation. Over here on the right-hand side, the purchase price in 2021 was $240,000. Has kind of an irrelevancy to tax purposes. The market value was $176,870. That's what was on the auditor's website, which I've just shown you. The assessed value, as you've seen as well, is $61,910. If you look at what the new tax levy is, millage is 9.99. That calculation we need to look at is what the assessed value is times 0.001. That's what 1 mil is. And that gives us a price of, or a cost of $61.91. When you multiply that by 9.99 mils, you get $618.48 per year of additional tax as a result of this levy. Divide that by 12 months, and the monthly amount would be $51.54 as an increase to the current tax bill. I use this example because we get a lot of misinformation spreading out there that the purchase price of a home is what people's tax bill is based on. And that is, of course, not the case. And so we wanted to share that because that is something every resident needs to know and understand as part of what's coming with any type of levy campaign, but just in general, how the tax bill is actually generated. There is a tool on the website, and it's not up to date yet. We did a check, I believe it was last week, that will do this calculation for you. It is on the website. I've highlighted it there on the right-hand side. Again, this is Hamilton County Auditor. You can go to levy information, and at the top, it should say, and you'll have a hard time reading that, it says no proposed levies found. It's because the information on the site has not been updated yet. It will be. We anticipate that to be in the next couple of weeks. But you would be able to go into your own property on the Hamilton County Auditor's website, and it will tell you exactly what this will mean for your own property. Okay, so you don't have to do the math wizardry to figure this out. You can if you want to and can calculate that. Did the example for you to show how it works. The auditor's website will do that for you once that information is uploaded. I want to draw your attention one more time, and I did this last time as well. House Bill 920 is such an important piece of legislation that was passed a long time ago and is impacting school districts today. It was passed in 1976, and I won't read all this information, but to put it very simply, this puts school districts on a fixed income. We are not able to collect any more dollars than what was voted in at the time of the vote. So when you look at your tax bill and you see the total tax rate and an effective rate, the effective rate is generating the same amount of funds that would have been generated at the time of the vote, of the election. As you can imagine, when we're on that fixed income from 2009, we all understand the concept. I believe I shared with you last time kind of a household example of if we were on the same exact income of 2009, the purchasing power is so much less here in 2022. And that is exactly the analogy to make with a school district. I am a little bit of a weather junkie. I'm using this as an example of what a 5-year forecast. That cone of uncertainty in a hurricane is not too much dissimilar from what you see in a 5-year forecast. What's right in front of us, we can understand and know pretty well. The further we get out, the less certainty there is in what that 5-year forecast looks like. There are all kinds of factors. Ms. Burke is here tonight, our treasurer. It is her role as the treasurer of the district to work this 5-year forecast in cooperation with myself and with the Board of Education and to present that 2 times a year for the board's approval. The next time that will happen is in May. Okay? These are factors, not an inclusive list of factors that have an impact on the 5-year forecast. It changes all the time. It changes sometimes daily. But this is a number of factors that we have to consider regularly when it comes to a 5-year forecast. I've shared this slide with you as well. This is what was last approved by the Board of Education back in November of 2021. And it is what the Finance Committee looked at in terms of what happens when we propose a levy. And so to take a lot of numbers and boil it down to what's really the very most important, it's this blue box. Okay, this blue box shows us fiscal year 25. That is the school year 24-25. Okay, the light blue box here is showing what our projected cash balance would be at the end of the year in that fiscal year. This is positive in 24-25, I should say. And if we're not successful, we become negative in 24-25. The Ohio Department of Education looks at this when it's submitted and will send us a letter for corrective action. It's called a letter of fiscal watch, and we are required to submit a plan to fix this. By law, we are not allowed to operate in the negative. So one of 2 things has to happen. We have to have increased revenue, or we have to decrease our expenses. And as I shared with you before, the district has already reduced expenses to the tune of $1.8 million back in 2020, and really should have been looking for additional revenue at that time. However, due to the pandemic, due to federal influx of dollars, we've been able to sustain our budget until now without asking for additional revenue. What I wanted to share with you as well is, since the last time I was here, is what happens to our school district if we're not successful. $1.3 million over the next 2 years, it has a devastating impact on our school district. So what I would like to share with you now is what that really means. What does $1.3 million in our district mean to our district? And that's, again, mostly why I'm here this evening, is to show the implications of what happens if we're not successful. So 23.5 positions would be reduced, total savings of just over $1.3 million. This is an approximation. We use some generalities with numbers, because when you talk about reducing positions, every person has a different salary range, every person has a different situation, and the actual cost is different for every person. But we use some general numbers that are pretty good guesstimates of what those numbers would look like. But this is what we would end up looking at in terms of positions. We'll have increased class sizes. We will have decreased programming and course options for kids, including our elementary specials, elective course offerings at the high school level, shorter school day, moving to a 6-period day at the junior senior high, a longer gap between dismissal times. We would have decreased operational support in a lot of different personnel: secretarial, custodial, maintenance, counselor, dean of students, administration, and increased pay to participate fees. That will be an offset of expenditures that will go to families of athletes, because we will not be able to support the athletic department through our general fund in the same way that we did previously. A graphic a little bit differently, just to show our current staffing levels for each of these areas. That's in yellow, and over here in orange on the right is what the future staffing would look like. You can see where all of these positions are coming from in specific areas. That comes from content areas, that comes from grade levels, it comes from specials. When you already cut $1.8 million out of a $17 million budget, there truly is not much left to reduce without having very significant impacts on our school district, and that ultimately is impacting our students. These are potential implications. We can't really know what the impact really is, but we also know that the school district is a major employer of personnel, and as has been come up in a number of different presentations and in community meetings, we know that's going to have an impact on the city if we have fewer staff members working. That income tax that comes from payroll would be a decrease to the city. There are unknown enrollment impacts to us. We don't know what our resident enrollment might look like if we have so many fewer options and increases in class sizes, if some families will seek other educational opportunities. We don't know what our open enrollment would mean. We take in many more applications every year for open enrollment than we accept. It's because there's a great value of our school district. When people want to come to us, what's that going to look like if we don't have as many services and programs and opportunities for kids? We don't know the answer to that, but we anticipate that that could have an impact. I don't know what the impact would be for future property value assessments. That's an unknown, but as we know that schools and the communities are often closely tied together, and it can have an impact. Well, saying kind of as the school goes, as the city goes as well, or in the community. That is a pretty standard idea in education. We don't know what that would look like, but we could anticipate some kind of impact. And regardless, if we're not successful, there will still be a need for additional revenue, even after reductions. So the reductions would take place, and it would be anticipated that we'd still be looking for additional revenue into the future. Again, just important to know that these reductions would be permanent. They don't come back if we have a levy that comes out in November and it were to be successful. Those reductions are reductions. They're not coming back later. So it's kind of a one-shot opportunity for our district at this time. The back end of this presentation is going to show you some additional data, again, easily found in 30 seconds online if you're interested in looking for it. And I've cited the sources on this presentation as well. We're going to look at similar school districts to ours. The Ohio Department of Education identifies 20 similar school districts based on a number of different factors across the state of Ohio. This is a screenshot of that website, again, which is right here at the bottom. And you'll note that there are 3 highlighted boxes there. They're the only 3 in Hamilton County that are similar, 2 that are similar to us. So we are the top one. There are 20 different districts that are similar to us as identified by the state of Ohio. 2 of those are in Hamilton County. Okay, one of those is Norwood, the 6th most similar to us, and the other, the 11th most similar to us is Deer Park. Most of these you may not know anything about, and that's why you look at this list to see what can you compare to of something that is familiar to you. So that's why we're going to do a little bit of a comparison here to similar districts. Again, this is a lot of information and numbers, but what I want to show is that from the CUP report, and if you're not familiar with the CUP report, again, that's easily found, which is a 600-plus page document that shows all kinds of data related to school districts all around the state of Ohio. So for informational purposes, if you want to spend some time, I would encourage you to do so. It gives you all kinds of great information. I have pulled some of that data for this slideshow so that you can see how we are in comparison to districts that are identified as similar to us in the state of Ohio. But the 2 that are similar to us in our county, which you might know something about, and how we factor and compare to those. Looking at a number of different things, including average teacher salary, the number of administrators for each of these districts, assessed property value per pupil, so that's all the property value divided by the number of students in the district, what that generates in terms of 1 mil, what the operating expenditures per pupil are, and what's the total revenue per pupil. I won't read all the numbers to you, but I think what you can see here is it will give you a column of all ODE similar districts, all 20 of them, what ours is, and then what our 2 most similar districts look like. And as you can look at that, the comparisons are pretty stark in a variety of different metrics on how we are functioning and operating with our budget and what our revenue is, and compared to some of the expenditures that we have with other school districts in our area, as well as around the state of Ohio. I'm back tonight with a few additional frequently asked questions. Some of these are going to be repeats. There are new ones because we continue hearing misinformation or questions that are coming out, whether that's through social media or through a number of different avenues in person. One of the questions was a fair school funding plan, and that was big news last year in the legislature. There was a lot of excitement generated about this. It was a multi-year plan to change the funding system for the state of Ohio for education, and that was agreed to legislatively last year, but in a 6-year implementation phase-in process. We are currently in year 1 of that. We would have to get through not only this biennium budget, but the next 2 biennium budgets before this would ever get fully implemented. So we don't know what's going to impact biennium budgets in the next number of years. New legislators, potentially new governor, new budget process. We don't know if this will be implemented to its fullness. So those are unknowns, but it has been in process, but it's not realized to the level that would be expected to be realized 6 years from now at this point. Another big question is open enrollment. How does it impact our district financially? A big question that's been asked in a number of different venues. This is a complicated conversation. I will say that Ms. Burke and I have been on the phone with the top financial person in the state of Ohio about this topic. And the reason it's complicated is because the funding formula has changed. So it used to be a little bit more clearly able to be identified. That calculation is really still trying to be fully understood right now, and we are 2.5 months into this biennium budget. What I will tell you is that we got confirmation that we are not anticipating to see any less money than what we previously received under previous budgets. That means we are anticipating approximately $1.9 million from the state as a result of the number of open enrollment students that we have. And that is, of course, critical to our budget. If we were to, as a Board of Education, change a policy that did not allow open enrollment any longer, and all of those students no longer were in our district, we would lose $1.9 million in funding, and we would have to take appropriate cost-cutting measures to make that happen. And as you can see, $1.3 million is significant. We talked already about property valuation assessments. I won't get into this a whole lot more because I've explained it previously, but it is one of the most frequently asked questions. My property tax bill went up. Didn't the school district get more money? Talked about House Bill 920, showed what those calculations were. And I would encourage you to go back and look at your own tax bills over the last number of years. Not the overall number, but look at what the school district is getting and see how remarkably similar they are. There may be slight variations. If somebody's property value or property tax went up slightly, someone else's probably went down slightly, because we're still going to get the same amount of money. Okay, so please go back and take a look at that. That's really important. When would the changes to property tax bill happen? If this were to be successful, those collections would begin in 2023. These are repeat questions that we are continuing to talk about, only because they're continuing to be major questions out in the community, particularly related to the TIF agreement from this past year, and also the Duke pipeline. Nothing's changed on here at this point. Those are still future potential changes in our revenue, but nothing has been determined with any specificity just yet. And so therefore it can't be accounted for in the 5-year forecast. Fundraisers, I talked about that last time as well. School districts by law are not permitted to conduct fundraising. Now you see that PTOs and athletic boosters and those kinds of organizations are able to do fundraisers. However, those are not under the school district umbrella. They are their own separate entities. They can raise those funds, donate those funds for purposes that they're choosing, but they are not within our school district fundraising campaign. We are not permitted to do that. We've also talked previously about federal dollars, what I call ESSER funds, that is the federal pandemic relief funds that have come to our district. We've used the majority of those to offset current expenses that were permitted to be used by law for ESSER funding, and that is what has allowed us to extend our budget for 2 years past what was anticipated needing new revenue. I keep the stadium question on here. I'm certain council receives that same question too. This levy has nothing to do with the stadium other than the fact that we do have the lease agreement that we do pay for out of the general fund, and we will be able to continue doing that because we have the general fund dollars to do so. Central property, as I mentioned previously as well, is still a district property. The Board of Education took action to maintain that property as a district asset. So again, if the board were to choose to sell that property, those funds that would be the proceeds would not be able to be used for general operating expenses. Okay, it would have to go into a different account to be used for permanent improvements, not operating expenses. Then the Hilltop Athletic Complex, I will just do a little bit of a plug that is able to be played on this spring for games. So one of the questions is, what's it going to cost to maintain it? We will have a contract. Omnia 360 is our custodial and maintenance provider. They will subcontract with the installer of the fields to do the actual field maintenance. That's much different than just mowing grass. They will be taking care of the fields, making sure that they're maintained properly and being used, along with our coaches and volunteers that will do some work to make sure those are in good shape for field play. We will also have Omnia 360 doing some of the grass cutting for us. So we haven't used it yet, so we won't know until we get through 1 year what this is actually going to look like. But we could anticipate this being approximately $35,000 to $40,000 of maintenance per year. I'd like to invite everyone, if you're interested, in attending our community town hall meeting. That is on March 21st at 7 o'clock in the cafetorium. Open mic question and answer for anybody that would like to attend. Lots of the same information, maybe in a slightly different way in some cases, but will be shared with as many people that would like to attend as possible. And there are also community conversation opportunities. I've shared this with council before, and it's accessible on our website. These are all open to the public. Anyone can come and join us. Sometimes they're on Zoom, sometimes they're at a local establishment, sometimes they're on campus. And again, I have noted in yellow the community town hall meeting next Monday evening. And that is all I have for this evening. So again, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight.
Members of council, does anyone have a question for Mr. Enix?
Not so much for Mr. Enix. I would like to thank you for making sure we separate this council from the Board of Education. They are a decision-making board. They make decisions for their organization the same way we do for ours. However, we are in one community, and it's impossible to separate one from the other. We are not here to persuade our constituents in any way. It's simply information. We've had guest speakers nearly every meeting from Unicity and so on. It's not been a problem. We have our academic Hall of Fame right back there for some reason. So apparently lines have been crossed, blurred in the past. I would like mention, we could play 3 degrees of separation for just about anybody in any organization within this town. It's a small town. Connected to people doesn't influence people necessarily. I trust the honor of this board to do their jobs properly. That's all.
Appreciate your comment. Anybody else?
I do have a
Howell.
question.
Yes.
Several times, I guess in both presentations, you mentioned that you do not see any revenue yet from the Duke pipeline. How would the district see revenue from the Duke pipeline? Can you explain that?
Until that were to actually happen, I think it's maybe not easily understood just yet, but it does run through the district, and it will have an assessed value that will, based upon whatever that assessed value is, will generate revenue for not only us, but also for the city. What that will look like, I can't speak to just yet, but we would anticipate seeing some amount of revenue from that once it is actually up and running.
So is it based on the amount of product they put through it, or is it based on the value of the infrastructure, if you will?
I don't want to misspeak on this, as I am not completely knowledgeable on exactly how that will work, but as my understanding, it would be it's due to the fact that it is part of, it will have assessed value as property and therefore have some kind of impact on district revenue.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
I don't know if Ms. Burke, if there's anything else you would want to add, if you have any additional info?
Please come to the microphone.
So yes, to answer your question, it is based on, it's public utilities. So any type of public utilities that run through the district have a valuation on it, and then we will receive the income based on that valuation.
Okay, now is that just on what they would own and fee? Because I know a lot of the pipeline runs through public right-of-way. So is it based, do they get anything for the right-of-way, or is it only where it runs through private property?
I don't know the answer to that. I just know it's based on the total valuation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions from council? From the audience, Mr. Gertz.
Anthony Gertz, 401 Pike Street here in Reading. Just a couple observations. I work in the field of estate planning and trusts. I do a lot of that. There are a lot of elderly clients.
Can you grab the mic? The stand's a little bit broken. Good. Just
I represent a lot of people in estate planning, trusts, and many people who are on fixed incomes. And I'm very interested in trying to understand all of the ramifications of what's going on with the proposed increase in taxes. This will represent in our community over the past 7 years the equivalent of a 17.5 mill levy increase for our residents here. One of the things I'm not sure of, Mr. Enix, I may not agree with you in your observation. My experience over the years in dealing with evaluations, you are correct. It's 35% of the assessed value on the property. So if you had a $100,000 piece of property, you'd pay taxes on $35,000 of the assessed value. However, my experience over the years has been when the property, and we've been very fortunate from my observation, that property's been selling very well in Reading at a higher price. And my observation in the past has been that when a property sells for $200,000, it might have been on the tax duplicate at the time for $150,000. Well, the auditor's office catches up with that. They don't just go with the previous assessed value. If the property sells for $200,000, their attitude is, well, we made a mistake, at least my observation has been in the past, we made a mistake as to how we determine the assessed value of that property. So the next time they do their evaluations, it's going to go on at $200,000. Now, I don't know if that's going to occur before or after any levy would pass, but just because the current assessed value is, on your example, I don't recall exactly. There were a lot of numbers to try to keep up with, to be honest with you. But if it was on at $165,000 and sold for $225,000, sooner or later the auditor's office is going to catch up. They're going to say we didn't assess this property accurately because the fair market value was $225,000, and that's what they're going to put on. Now, it won't be the tax will not be on $225,000, as Mr. Enix pointed out. It'll be 35% of the $225,000. It won't be on the $165,000. So there are some disparities that I'm concerned about. One of the things that strikes me is this is a primary election, and I realize we had a pandemic, we had these issues, and I appreciate all of that. However, there were opportunities. I brought this up about 2 years ago that I anticipated there was going to be an operating levy probably needed, but the school might want to apply for. Actually, the person who told me that was Mayor Bemis in a private conversation. You may not recall that, but that's what you did tell me. And I anticipated it, and then I got kind of chided for bringing that up. But here we are, and I think they anticipated this a lot sooner than putting this on a primary election now. Historically, primary elections, people don't come out to vote nearly as much as they do in the general election. And that worries me a bit with my clients, because I'm afraid I recently have talked to several people and they're not even aware it's on the ballot. So I don't know how much more publicity we can do. I'm hoping there'll be more put out about it in more detail. Other things that bother me a little bit at this time, as you're well aware, if you're not, then you haven't been to the grocery store. Inflation's up at 7.9%, going on 8%. Now, people on a fixed income, you know, that's going to cost them. They don't have that ready cash. I don't see President Biden raising all the Social Security payments that much, and I don't see people who have fixed retirement benefits getting their increases going up 8%. In addition, we're all paying about $4.50 in gasoline, which adds into the inflation, obviously. So it bothers me that we're doing this in a primary election at this time. I wish we had more time to do an evaluation and to, in effect, let the people in the community become more aware. I appreciate what he's saying. I will digress for a moment, and I agree with the President of Council. I think that we have failed to use the ICRC in an effective way. They could be putting on something nightly if they wanted that people could watch, because there are a lot of numbers we're throwing out here. I think it gets very confusing as we look at it. At least it did to me, and I try to keep up with numbers. But the other thing I don't think we've considered either, and maybe the community's not aware of it, I would hope the school is, we have a new school coming into Reading. It's the Cincinnati Classic Academy up at the old Sacred Heart property. And anyone who's been involved, Mr. Boehner, I think, is active in that parish. Of course, we're all one parish now, Our Lady of the Valley. But nevertheless, that school is going to be opening up in the near future. And they're going to be bringing in approximately 300 students or more. And I don't know how many of those will be not going to Reading schools. They may be going to the new Cincinnati Classic Academy, and they're going to be bringing in people to work there. So we will lose some teachers if this doesn't pass. Well, obviously, if the attendance goes down, that's going to happen. But at the same time, we have other employment of new teachers coming into the community. So I think we need to give ourselves a little more time to analyze some of these facts. I haven't made a decision. I'm leaning to not vote for the levy because of the things I brought up. However, I do love the children. You know, it's all about the kids. And I certainly have taught a lot of these kids, to be frank with you, because I've taught elementary education in my lifetime. I've taught college education, business law. So I have a love for working with children, Mr. Tomlin, and I know he worked with my grandson this past year. He went there, goes there, graduating. But I'm concerned about some of the questions I'm raising here, and I do think that Mr. Dom is correct. This really probably isn't the proper forum, and we do have a lot of issues concerning conflicts of interest, and I wish we had put this on a series with the ICRC over a long period of time, that we would have it for I don't know, you could have a weekly program, you could have every 3 or 4 days talk about one of these issues that was presented tonight. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak to council as well and on these issues, but I myself, I've got a lot of questions and I'm concerned. And one of the things about the ball field up there, that property, a few years back, we did some analysis and looked into it, some of us. And my recollection, we as a community, the school system, I think it was $1.5 million, as I remember. And the retirement per year was $160,000. And that was coming out of operations to retire it because I asked, oh, thank you, okay. So to say that property up there and development of the Hilltop Park, was that an opportune time to do that? I don't know. I don't know. I think that's pointed out the Ohio checkbook. I don't know what we spent on further developing it. I do know that it's under a lease program with the creditor. So at the last observation was $950,000 was still left in the fund, but they still owed about $1.5 million. So I don't know how much more has been spent on the field. I don't know what the retirement of the debt is. Is it more than $160,000 a year now? And if it is more than $160,000 a year, then that's coming out of the general fund. Maybe we should have looked at that a little differently. I don't know if we should have or not. I haven't had a chance to do a thorough analysis of it, but it worries me that maybe we're not doing, doing this at the right time. And maybe we ought to take a further look in it, but thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Gertz. Mr. Enix, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I think Ms. Burke and I would both like to respond to a couple of those items. First of all, the timing is critical for us, and we recognize it's primary, but you have to understand that we work in school years, right? So the school year comes to a close at the end of May. The reason why the Finance Committee made the recommendation to the board and the board approved this to be on the May 3rd ballot is if we're not successful, as I mentioned, we have to make $1.3 million in cuts or cost savings. You can't do that in the middle of the school year. You know, our personnel is already in place for the year. We can't just change everything mid-year if this was on the ballot in November, because our personnel is already there. They're already working with kids. We have schedules. We simply can't undo everything in November if this were to not be successful. So the idea of being in May is if this were to not be successful, those reductions could happen for the next fiscal year, next school year, and we would be able to do 2 years worth of savings prior to that zero mark that we saw in fiscal year 25. That's the rationale for doing that. So that's part one. We'll talk about property valuations, and obviously we look at this so regularly. Obviously the Hamilton County valuations have just been completed. Those happen on a triennial cycle, I think that is, every 3 years. So if this were to be a successful levy, remember House Bill 920, if the property value goes up, the tax collections roll back so that we don't collect any more than what was voted in at the time that they were voted in. So the property value would go up, but that rollback and effective millage would change for property owners so that there's not additional funds coming in for the school district as a result of property valuations go up. Those happen all the time. Property valuations do go up. Sometimes they go down. We know that we saw that happen at one point too. And that changed things as well. So it does have an impact on property values, of course, but the taxable rate is not impacted because of House Bill 920. I think we'll talk just a little bit, and just to clarify for Mr. Gertz, yes, the debt service on the Hilltop property does come out of the general fund. That was one of the frequently asked questions. I mentioned that at the last presentation as well. Not hiding from that. That was a loan called the COPS. You might remember that. It was a certificate of participation. This dates back many years ago when the Hilltop building was there. There was roof problems, there was leaking, there had to be some work done, and the district took out a loan effectively to help do those improvements. Not all those funds were used because at the time there was the OFCC project that we became eligible for. That would have been back in 2015, I believe, is when the levy was put on the ballot to build the new building. But those funds from the certificate of participation, that loan, was still able to be used. And we had legal opinion that did not permit us to use the remaining funds to pay off that loan. So the money did have to be used for permanent improvements for the district, and that's where the study into the Hilltop property really came into being. And the project did use the remaining funds. It came in on time, it came in on budget, came in on phase 1 of what's anticipated to be a phase 2 and phase 3 process over time that would be upgraded with additional features that would not be from the school district general fund. It would come from donations and other private entities to support that. So that is, again, again, for the sake of transparency, that is, debt service is coming out of the general fund. And again, we've had that on the frequently asked questions tonight as well as previously. And that's all I have.
Jen, please come. Mrs. Burke, you're going to speak first. Go ahead, go ahead.
So I just wanted to answer your question about the Ohio checkbook. In full transparency, the district is very aware that the Ohio checkbook has not been updated. Ohio is moving to a new financial software, which is called the Redesign, and SSDT for the state of Ohio is having trouble for any district that is on the Redesign to be able to upload their data. So we do have tickets in with our ITC, letting them know that our data has not been updated, but they are working on that. So it's not an effort to scrub any information. It's just, we cannot get our data up there, and we do have tickets in place to get that resolved.
Are you able to send me any year's information, say in the last 10 years?
I'm sure we could, and you could always do a public records request to get that information as well. Anyone from the community could do a public records request for any specific information that you're looking for.
Okay, before you
But
go,
we're
I'll give you my
actively
email.
working to get that resolved so that any community member can go online and get that information at their fingertips. That's what Auditor Yost wants to do, and that's what all the districts are doing. It's not a requirement of the district to sign up for that. We voluntarily signed up for that for transparency reasons.
Okay, so before you go, I'll give you my email.
Okay.
Any other questions from the gallery? Jen?
I am, Jennifer Dick, 227 Harvest. I'm one of only 2 admin for the community page. Prayers are accepted. We take them. But we deal a lot with the levy and happenings in the school and the city and stuff. So I had a question. I was wondering if the levy passes, does that mean that another counselor is added? I know if it doesn't pass, there's a reduction in one, but I didn't know if there was an addition of one, because there was a statement made on the community page regarding bullying. There's been a lot of bullying stuff. I actually quit counting at over 1,500. It's like 1,533 comments about bullying. So as it goes to the levy, a lot of people have said, until the bullying situation is under control, or until we know what the policies and processes are to deal with this, I'm a no on the levy. And then other people there was one comment specifically that said, that if the levy passes, a counselor would be added, but if not, policy or programs and staff that would handle the bullying would not be around or would not be implemented, and so bullying would get worse if you don't pass the levy. So I don't know if maybe this can be part of the school district's presentation to kind of clarify some of that. I'm quite disappointed that I've seen all those comments on the page about kids being bullied, and I don't see one parent here tonight. I'm not a current parent in the city. My kids have graduated. So I'm kind of disheartened by that, and it kind of, in my mind, takes away credibility from those who run to Facebook to complain, but don't put their money where their mouth is when it counts. So that was my question. Thank you.
Again, that's not one that anybody here can answer. Mr. Enix is probably the best one to answer the bullying question.
I think probably the best way to answer that question is full faith and effort of our administrators, our counselors that address student issues when they are known, happens on an every single day basis. I can't tell you the number of times that something happens and we find out it's been weeks in the making, months in the making, and it's happening over social media or it's happening outside of school and it bubbles up inside the school. If our administrators don't know anything about it, they can't do anything to address it. And I know that that is a number one priority for all of our administrative team and our counselors. So I would always caution, again, what the definition of bullying is that people are utilizing as opposed to what the real definition of bullying is. But I would also just say that, again, if there's something that's happening, there are avenues and channels to address that, and that goes straight to the people in the building that work with our kids every single day. So I have full faith in our building principal, Mr. Ferguson, and Mrs. Fraley at the elementary, that they are on top of that on a regular basis, and I see it every single day. The other part of your question, and just phrase that for me again, just to make sure I answer it for you.
Someone had made the comment that if the levy passed, council would be added.
Right, okay. So just for clarity, our current operating levy is for kind of a status quo mentality. We are keeping essentially what we have in place. It's not to go out and hire a lot more new staff, and it's not for a whole bunch of new programs. It's not for anything that's outside of our current budget.
There's nothing in the levy that is specifically targeted for.
These are general operating funds, yes, and that covers everything we do operationally and how the budget gets allocated every single year, and it does have, again, lots of different avenues. The biggest part of it is for the personnel, but we do have curriculum and other types of things that go along with our district budget.
Is there a policy or a process that I can post, like independent to the community page to say, you know, if you're experiencing, your child is experiencing this is what you do, you know,
Yeah.
so that way.
Those policies that are approved by our Board of Education, and they're on our website, and they're very readily accessible. Yes, you're welcome. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.
Any other questions for Mr. Enix? You raised a hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to say real quick that there is a school board meeting tomorrow at 5:30. So for those watching, and if anybody else has questions, then that is a great place to go and ask.
Okay. I have a couple of questions. Ms. Burke, you already answered one of them. Thank you. Mr. Enix, I went through the ORC regarding school financial watches. There are several ways of going on a watch. 3 of them are possible. Only one of them involves the school board. All 3 of them involve you. Who kicked off the school watch?
I don't understand your question.
Ohio Revised Code, Section 3316.03, Auditor of State to declare a fiscal watch or fiscal emergency. There are multiple methods to kick off a fiscal watch. 3 of them are possible. Only one of them involves the school district, school board kicking it off. All 3 of them involve the superintendent of public education, which is you. How did that get kicked off?
I guess I'm still not understanding what your question is. If you're talking about in 2019, is that what you're referring to?
No, the current fiscal watch, or it's not an emergency yet that I'm aware of. But
We
the
have
current
not
fiscal
received
watch.
that letter from the Ohio Department of Education as of yet.
So you're not on a fiscal
That's
watch?
correct.
Okay.
We're
So we're not in trouble yet? Okay, just wanted to bring that up. Second, beyond the bullying issue, which I could address, that's not the one I'm looking for. Where'd it go? There it is. With what the school's gathering now, I don't know if you can see all the red on there. Red is F, and as you go toward green, it gets better. The overall grade that OD has given Reading schools is a C. Lots of Fs in there, lots of Ds, lots of Cs. I had a teacher one time who said there should be 3 grades, A, B, and F. A means you got it, go on. B means, yeah, you're pretty close, I think you can handle it. The rest is, you don't have it. So I'm looking for A's and B's in there. I don't see too many. Explain to me how the increase in a school levy is going to change that.
As I mentioned previously, these are for operating expenses. This is for the personnel that works with our kids every day. That's the primary, biggest part of our budget. Without our personnel, we will have a problem doing anything correct in an academic kind of way, in the same way that we currently are. Higher class sizes, fewer offerings, these are all going to be impacted if we're not successful. What I will tell you is that, you know, the district, when I got hired 2 years ago, the focus was on getting back to the business of education. During that time, there have been a lot of factors, and that's not an excuse, but there have been a lot of factors that have impacted everyone in terms of our education for all students, and I could run through a myriad of those. What I will tell you is the commitment to improvement and continuous improvement is a primary value that we have. We underwent a strategic planning process last year where student learning was the very first point of emphasis for our school district. We've been able to reallocate resources at a cost-neutral way to identify certain individuals and supports that are needed to really get curriculum, learning, instruction, professional development, and growth as a primary focus for our district. We are in year one of that process right now. And there's a lot of great work that's been done throughout the course of this year, even during the operations that we've had to kind of endure now 2 years into the pandemic. So I am very proud of the work that's happening with our staff, with our administrative team, and as a collective team from the Board of Education all the way down to prioritize getting to the business of education. I would always say that there's a whole lot more to a school district than what you see on a state report card. It's important, but it's not everything about the quality of the education that students are receiving, and yet we focus on that as well as growing students, taking them where they come to us and helping to grow them. That may or may not always be reflected by a single test on a single date and time that happens in the spring. But I can tell you that the focus every single day is improving our students. That I can promise you.
That's an awesome answer.
And one final question. You keep talking about the average salary of a teacher. That's based on what I was able to find on teacher salaries in Ohio Checkbook, not the best indicator of teacher salary. I would say the median teacher salary, based on what I was able to review, is in the upper 70s to low 80s, not the average 62 that you present. So, just a little math study in statistics. Some people call it statistics. There's a difference between average and median. Average is the sum of all divided by the count of all. The median is where the highest group or grouping falls. So that's something to watch too as we go through your presentations, just as a comment.
And I would like to just respond to that I utilize the data that's readily accessible from the Ohio Department of Education's website. That comes from the CUP report. It is able to be found, and it's able for anybody to go use. That is the data that the Ohio Department of Education is utilizing and puts on their website for comparative purposes. So I am fully aware that there's a difference between the average and the median. But for the purposes of the CUP report, that is at least a metric that is used that can be compared across districts across the state of Ohio. So.
Very good. Any further questions to Mr.?
I have a comment.
Yes,
because
Ms. Kroger.
I'm having a hard time sitting with my mouth shut over here. I think the same applies to you that you told Mr. Bothy. If you want the answers to those questions, you should probably go to the school board meeting.
To which my reply would be, the people here voted to have Mr. Enoch speak.
And I 100% agree with you on that one.
His presentation,
His
yes,
presentation.
but this is not a board meeting and this is not a public forum for it, so.
Excellent points, both of you. Thank you.
Practice what you preach. You know, I'd like to.
Hold on.
I'd like to ask Mr. Enoch some questions.
You want to, go ahead. I opened it up. Go ahead. Ask him some
Yes, you did.
questions. Go ahead.
You know, Mr. Enoch, is it true or not true that Reading Public Schools accept all children that walk into your door?
That's true.
All children. Do you get to ask what country they came from?
No.
Do you get to ask what language they speak?
No.
No. You get to ask what kind of troubles they've been into?
No.
Get to ask what other schools they've been expelled from?
No.
Absolutely not. You know, when you want to look at a report card, and I'll tell you this from many years of experience, my wife's in her 37th year up there, lives, dies, and breathes Reading Community Schools. My father did before. They do an outstanding job, as Mr. Enix correctly said, with each and every child that walks in that building. No questions asked. In they walk, they're welcomed. Is that true?
Yes.
They're treated with great respect, and every opportunity, every effort is made, as Mr. Enix correctly said, to improve every single child that walks in that building. I also want to say this too, and I'll pose this question to Mr. Enix. You know, our school board, or our schools are funded separately from our city, correct?
Correct.
They have different governing boards, don't they? You know, to my knowledge, that's just about where the separation ends. You know, our country was founded by people that didn't want a government at all. They didn't want a government at all. They wanted to, in fact, establish a small limited government. I believe our original Constitution was 12 pages. 12 pages. You know what the first thing our founding fathers did? They recognized the fact that we needed to be a country of high moral values, honest, polite, decent, respectful people, and second and equally, highly educated people, people able to be self-sufficient. And here we are. You know, we will never, ever have a more important presentation than what we saw tonight. We will never, ever have a relationship that more intertwines with our city government than that which with our schools. When our schools are teaching our children and giving our children opportunities and providing them outstanding opportunities, A to Z, during school hours, after school hours, year-round, it lightens our job as a city tremendously. Excellent cities have excellent schools, period. You don't have excellent schools, you do not have an excellent city. You don't have a well-educated public, you fail as a government. Hands down, flat out. Read our country's history. We will never, ever have a more important relationship than that we have with our school. The other thing, Mr. Dahm, I wanted to point to you, you know, we have rules that apply to us in Ohio Revised Code. Common decency, common courtesy, and common respect have always overruled those here in this community. You know, you had 2 weeks to sit there and try to disallow an effort to educate our public. And you wait till the last minute. I apologize from this city for the rude way, you know, our schools were treated tonight. Feel awful about it. My sincere apology, you know, to each and every one of you. I could keep asking you a question, Mr. Enix, but I'm going to ask the ones over again. Do you have to accept every child that walks into that school?
Yes.
It's a public school. You know, I wonder what would happen to other schools, you know, their grade averages, as you want to quote here tonight, if they had to accept every child. So anyway, you know, to me, people, this is why we should end ICRC. Really should. It's flat out embarrassing. Flat out embarrassing. You owe me an apology.
Well, a forced apology is no apology, so
Yeah, it shouldn't be forced.
moving on. Since I think that's the last of the questions, unless I'm mistaken. There's no executive session scheduled. Is there a need for one?
No.
Seeing none. Legislative session, reading of resolutions. We have one resolution, unless somebody has another. Mrs. Kotcher.
The following is a resolution enacted by the City of Reading of Hamilton County, Ohio, hereinafter referred to as the local public agency in the matter of the stated described project.
First reading only? Very good.
Just a quick discussion on this. This is for the, since Patrick's not here, it's for the Safe Routes to School project. It's a grant that we received to put sidewalks in, excuse me, on the section of Columbia between Jolie Terrace and Orchard Knoll. And we did receive, we received the grant money for it, or?
No, we have not.
Okay.
We applied.
We applied for the grant money. So, to explain this, that's basically to move ahead with that project pending that grant money. So,
Yeah, Bo, I've got a question on this, not maybe it's an unfair question to you, but $400,000 is what the grant's for. That seems awful lot of money for that stretch of sidewalk. Is there, we have moving utilities, are we doing something else?
Well, you know something, one of the amazing things we found out about this, we do not get the money till 2025.
Okay.
So we got engineers' estimates that were significantly less than that. There's also a crosswalk improvement, also in lighting improvement. But again, we're guessing ahead as to what this project would cost in 2025.
Okay.
This was a best guess from our engineers. That's why it took to the last minute, and our safety and service director spent a lot of time in this. Our Reading schools spent a lot of time on this.
Is this something that needs to be passed tonight, or?
Yes, oh, absolutely. You know, we had to file for it by Friday. We need this.
I'll make a motion, we suspend the rules, require a second, third reading.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Mr. Boehner, seconded by Mrs. Edichico to suspend the rules requiring the second and third reading. Roll call, please.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Bronner?
Yes.
Mr. Bishop?
Yes.
Mr. Boehner?
Yes.
Mr. Tomlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Kroger?
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico?
Yes.
The resolution is adopted. Is there a resolution number?
That was,
That's suspension.
This is, I'm sorry, to suspend the rules.
I'll move to adopt.
I'll second.
Second.
So again, Mr. Boehner and Mrs. Edichico, I heard you first. Say, a roll call, please.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Bronner?
Yes.
Mr. Bishop?
Yes.
Mr. Boehner?
Yes.
Mr. Tomlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Kroger?
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico?
Yes.
Resolution number 2022-9R.
Thank you. We have two ordinances, so whichever one you wish to do first, Mrs. Catcher.
The first one is 2022 permanent appropriation, and ordinance to make appropriations for the current expenses and other expenditures of the city of Reading, state of Ohio during the period ending December 31st, 2022.
Okay, is there a need for,
Well, administration requests first reading only.
first reading only?
Yeah, there's a lot of reading here, Dwight, you know,
That's
we all
fine.
need to take a good look at
I
this.
prefer first, second, and third readings.
Okay.
So, perfectly cool. All right, we have another one.
An ordinance vacating that portion of Third Street abutting property owned by Nito Denko Avicia Incorporated and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend the second and third reading?
Second.
Up, over here this time, so it was Mrs. Kroger and Mrs. Edichico. Motion to suspend second, third reading. Roll call, please.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Bronner?
Yes.
Mr. Bishop?
Yes.
Mr. Boehner?
Yes.
Mr. Tomlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Kroger?
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico?
Yes.
7 yes, so that carries. Is there a motion to adopt? Motion to adopt by Mr. Bronner.
Second.
And seconded by Mr. Bishop. Roll call, please.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Bronner?
Yes.
Mr. Bishop?
Yes.
Mr. Boehner?
Yes.
Mr. Tomlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Kroger?
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico?
Yes.
7 yes, the ordinance carries. Ordinance number?
2022-10.
Okay. Any other ordinances out there?
Move to adjourn.
Hold on, we haven't made it to miscellaneous business yet, so miscellaneous business. Does
I'd like
anyone have miscellaneous business? You have miscellaneous business, go ahead.
Yes, I do. A couple things are going to happen in our community before the next council meeting. On March 19th, this Saturday, the American Legion's Ladies Auxiliary will be holding a Monte Carlo / reverse raffle at the Hayfie Fieldhouse. Proceeds go to our fireworks fund. You know, something that a tremendous amount of people enjoy each and every year as we celebrate our independence. So please make it to the Hayfie Fieldhouse Saturday night. On April 2nd, St. Peter and Paul Academy will hold a Texas Hold'em tournament, and at the same time an NCAA party. That'll be at St. Peter and Paul Academy. The Texas Hold'em, I believe, is a $100 buy-in, they call it. People can call Mike Tice at 513-532-2600. 2774 to help support the Miracle on Clark Road. And I believe that's it before next meeting, and we can cover the rest of these things next meeting.
Do you want to announce the special meeting for next week?
Yeah, I am so sorry. Yes, I'd like to announce a special council meeting next Tuesday. Our police chief will be here. So that'll be, March 22nd. Thank you, Katie. And again,
7:30, Bo?
7:30 right here. I want to thank Bob Boehner for getting questions in. You know, our department heads love having questions beforehand as much as is possible. Helps them prepare and give you guys better information.
Mr. Bishop.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I assume this goes under miscellaneous business. I'm holding a Utilities, Lands, and Buildings Committee meeting on March 22nd at 6 p.m. before the other meeting. I expect it to last about 45 minutes. The topic for discussion is going to be the Cincinnati-Bell Unicity Wi-Fi project, the public Wi-Fi project. I'm hopeful that we'll have representatives from the Chamber of the Bridal District, the schools, and any other interested parties. I want to gauge hope we can all gauge the level of commitment, because we don't want this to be a burden on the city if we do it. So we want to make sure that everybody's going to benefit from it, is going to have a say in it, and come up with ideas on how we can fund it and everything else. So if anyone's interested, it is open to the public. We'll have it in the caucus room. Unless it gets too big, then we'll come in here and hold it.
Very good.
What time is that again?
That's at 6 o'clock.
Thank you.
And I have notes that I made from his last presentation, on this. I'm happy to share them with anybody. If they want them, they can email me at my city email address, mbishop@readingohio.org. I'm happy to send you a copy of those notes to kind of peruse ahead of time. Thank you, Mr. President.
Any other, so it seems to me like, because this is the second general meeting, and the agenda is slightly different from the first meeting, where I call for the various committees of council. It seems like maybe we need to, it's up to you guys, you want to add committee of council reports for this meeting as well to the agenda, because it sounds to me like some people bring them.
I believe it was just an announcement.
Just an announcement.
Okay.
Yeah, public notice that we were going to have the committee meeting.
Okay, that's fine. I was just observing.
I just want to let people know what it was concerning.
Okay, I do have one item. So, and I'll go back to what Mr. Tomlin said about 3 degrees of separation. Mr. Tomlin, you have 0 degrees of separation, being that you work at the school. So any teacher layoff could affect you directly. So you need to watch the recusals there.
I will recuse myself whenever the opportunity calls for it. I work for the community, ×2.
Well said. And others may also need to consider the same thing. That's all I'm going to say. Mr. Boehner, I believe you had a motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned.
Second.
Motion to adjourn by Mr. Boehner, second by Mrs. Kroger. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.